all grew up not seeing ourselves fully represented in the way that we should be as complete, complex individuals with flaws and unique character points of view, you know? So I think we all have to kind of keep fighting towards industry that we envision collectively. And we shouldn't just be saying, okay, well, where do I fit into this broken machine?
This particular panel is about television, but let's talk about what television is for a quick second, right? I mean, to me, that's anything that's serialized narrative storytelling. It can be digitally screened on your phone, on your tablet, in your living room, on a screen that is sitting right in front of you, or a screen as big as this. Television now, to me, is stretching across the whole landscape of what content can be. So I'm excited to talk, and I'm gonna start with you, Zoe. I had the pleasure of speaking with Zoe when she was nominated for an Independent Spirit Award for Slip. Tell us a little bit, yes, flowers.
Thank you.
Tell us a little bit about how that came to be. What was the creation process? What was the pitching like? How did you get it set up? Because it's so unique.
Oh, thanks. Slip was something that I wrote. I wrote all 7 episodes of the first season on my own in COVID, and I think I was at a place in my life and career where I wanted to just create the thing without interference, which is very rare, as we all know. And I think that's why I just wrote it. I was also, you know, as we all were, sort of trapped and facing our demons, and that was my only way out at the moment. At the time, Adam McKay came on as a producer, and this was, in the midst of COVID, as I mentioned, and I think because he's Adam McKay and Succession was at its peak, he was like, no problem, we're selling this tomorrow. We had a full season of television. I was attached to Star and Direct, and we took it out and did not sell it. And it was interesting for me to watch McKay actually face the reality of a shifting marketplace, and sort of be humbled by that. And then the sad reality for so many of us was that then it was shelved, and I was just devastated because it's the sort of like elevator pitches. It's about a woman who is trapped in an unhappy marriage and cheats on her husband one night and wakes up the next morning to realize that she's now married to the guy that she fucked. And then over the course of the season, she learns that through orgasm, she's teleporting to parallel universes. So every episode, she sleeps with someone else, and the catalyst is her orgasm to take her to the next world and relationship, as a sort of exploration of sex and love addiction. But, you know, it was a wild show, but it also was pretty high concept. And so I think it felt like there would be a home in this amazing landscape of streaming. And so then I just grieved it for, I think, maybe a year. And I was developing a show with Dakota Johnson and Riley Keough for HBO that also didn't go. This is just going to be like a story of just how garbage it all is most of the time. And one of the producers on that show was like, I wish that I had like a Sex and the City through a fantastical lens. And I was like, funny you should mention it. I have like 7 episodes that are written that are just have nowhere to live, and I've just been grieving them. And she was the kind of scrappy producer that one dreams of meeting, because she was like, oh, that's not all of the places. We had hit all of the main streamers and networks. And she went through a different path and was kind of trying to figure out, like, at the time, like Spectrum or CBC in Canada, or, you know, other ways to just get it made. And at the time, Roku was doing their own original programming, and they didn't yet have an original television show. And there was a man there who now is at Sony, but his name's Colin Davis, and he read the scripts and gave me a green light to series with no notes. So it was an interesting, like, really long way. I had set an intention that I wanted that to happen, which is I knew was completely impossible, and somehow landed there. You know, yeah, a long route after I had set the intention. But I then made it with Roku very cheaply, and that was sort of the trade-off, as it often is when you are given creative freedom. Generally, you're given no money, and
But also no notes.
but no notes. No, that's what I'm saying. Like,
Yeah.
and I will take that trade any day. And made it with Roku, came out on Roku, did very well critically, got nominated for 2 Independent Spirit Awards. It was just like a dream. And Roku took it off the platform entirely. So it's a sad story also, because it doesn't exist anywhere for anyone to see right now. And I'll cry talking about it. But that is like the sad reality, is like, it's the thing I'm most proud of in my career. And it cannot be seen. And when we did our panel, Wendy, you know, it was being lauded next to Beef and The Last of Us, and I was so humbled to be in the presence of these TV shows that I couldn't believe that this tiny thing that I'd imagined was in the same conversation. But on the red carpet of the Indie Spirit Awards, the conversation was, you can't see it, you know? And so I think that is just sort of just what one goes through in the creative process is I got to create, I got to live out such a dream, such a fantasy, the most creatively fulfilling artistic process of my life thus far, and also the one that brought me, I think, the greatest heartache that I'm still in the midst of.
You know, it's interesting. We used to have this saying on a show I worked on called Revenge. We said, revenge gets what revenge wants. She gets what she wants. And I think Slip gets what she wants, right? And who knows?
Totally.
Where she will come back again.
Yes.
I'm curious, Kit, a little bit about Unconventional. Now that's your latest work, right? How did it come into life? How did it get set up?
So Unconventional is a dark comedy about 2 eccentric queer siblings and their significant others trying to start an unconventional family where my character will be the sperm donor to his sister's character's girlfriend while he's trying to go through the adoption process with his husband. It's very unconventional. And I came to this space actually back in 2012, back when we called it a web series, with an independent project called Eastsiders, which we self-financed, my husband and I, for $2,000 and a stick of gum to hold the first episode together, put on YouTube, went viral, and then in the second season got picked up by Netflix. So we did 4 seasons of that show, and that kind of was the training ground to try to scale it beyond a crowdfunding budget into something that really felt like, from the inception, a television show. So that I would say is my first time really feeling like, okay, I'm making independent television. And you know, seeing the way that landscape has shifted dramatically in the 4 years since the inception of that project has been really interesting, especially as we go from production to post to trying to sell it. So we started filming. We were planning on filming shortly before COVID. I was actually scouting down in Louisiana when all of that first started to unfold, because we were going to shoot it in New Orleans, where it was originally set. I developed the project at the Sundance Lab and met with some independent financiers through my manager, Erwin Moore at Moore Medavoy. And we kind of put together this package, and we're super excited to convene a writer's room and shoot it in New Orleans. Then the world shut down, and we had to kind of rethink, you know, what would be safe to come back out of quarantine to film. So we reset it in the California desert, where my husband and I now live, in a case of like art imitating life, imitating art, in Joshua Tree and Palm Springs. And then we had a very unconventional road to getting it through production and post-production, and finally distributed this year on the LGBTQ cable channel Reverie, which is a fast cable channel, meaning you watch it like old-timey television with commercials and you flipping through the channels. They have like Pluto and these other emerging platforms, but they also have an SVOD platform like Netflix, where you subscribe and you can see it without all the bleeps and blurs, or an AVOD platform, which is advertising video on demand, where you watch it with commercials for free, but you can't see my butt. And now we're in the process of going through and exploring other avenues of sales. With Eastsiders, we started out on YouTube and then came to Logo, which was Viacom's LGBTQ network, on their website before being put on the cable channel, and then worked with Wolf Video, an independent film distribution company, to come to Amazon on TVOD, then SVOD, and then finally to Netflix in the second season, where they acquired global rights. So then it was very turnkey and simple. I didn't have to think about it at all. They were just translating it into 30 languages, and that was great. But now we're looking with Unconventional to sell it in other international markets, because our deal with Reverie was only exclusive to North America, US and Canada. So that's going to be the journey of the next year, is bringing the show to an international audience, which is starved, more starved than we are, for authentic LGBTQ storytelling. And that's one of the things that's been most rewarding about working in the independent space, is I'm literally telling stories that I know are not going to get made by traditional distribution networks.
So you feel like a pioneer.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and you too, right? You're on the new frontier with your storytelling.
Things got real gay in the Wild West back in the day, too.
I like that. Katie, you're unique because I know that you're writing on Paradise, right, for Hulu, and you worked on Station 11 and Mr. Robot. You've got your piece that you're developing right now. I would love to hear from you because I've been there and I want to know your experience. How do you maintain your independent voice when you're in a room where you're there to serve, not only the room of creative voices, but also a showrunner who has their own distinct voice? How do you manage that?
It's such a great question, because I think so many of us enter or dream of entering a room and, finally it's our time to sit at that table in the writer's room and really make a mark and go, okay, I'm gonna bring, we're gonna have this character who represents this group or this thing. And the thing that I've learned the most is that the showrunner is someone who has to, just like the other people on this panel, convince other people that this is an important story to tell. And so that person needs to feel it and they need to understand it. And in my experience, it's been, a white guy who's between 45 and 50. And so to have that man understand my experience or, anyone else's unique experience in a way that they haven't thought about before, and bring that to the other people that we're trying to make the movie for, or the TV show for, that is being able to explain something that I've experienced or a story that I want to tell in story terms, in deep emotional impact terms. And I've been very lucky to work with showrunners like Dan Vogelman who, can kind of listen and go, I maybe don't 100% get that, but I see that you think it's important, and so I think we should do it. And so in some of the worlds that I've been able to create, it's, for me, it's constantly, and I have the privilege of also being on set and helping to produce these episodes, especially of Paradise. So for me, it's a lot of sneaking things in where I can, and then also a little bit of honestly just kind of writing something in and waiting for somebody to say no. And that's something I'm really excited about. And in our new season 2, is just, I kind of threw a bunch of stuff at everybody, and it was so exciting to see our producers, our crew, so many people get excited about it instead of go, well, why are we doing this? Why about these people? People started to see themselves in the project in a totally new way, and bring their A game, which was very exciting for me. So I know I'm speaking in super veiled language right now because I don't want to spoil the show for you guys, but that's, in a very rambling way, that's sort of what I've learned.
I love it. I had the pleasure of seeing Billy's film right here, right on this very screen, his award-winning feature, Frybread, Face and Me. And he's done many, many documentaries, but right now he's on Dark Winds, is that right? Writing and directing?
Yes.
So
this is
how
the
are you
fourth,
bringing...
Actually, we're going into the 5th season. But I stepped away before the 4th for my next feature. But I've been on the show for 3 seasons, And I got that, it was my first staffing job. I got that job because my script, Frybread, my feature was going around trying to get, streamers to read it, and it got into the hands of the EP who was creating Dark Winds. And then, so we had meetings. And so, probably like 8 months later, I get this call, and he's like, hey, you want to get staffed? And I'm like, yes. But this is during the pandemic. So my whole staffing experience was done through, Zoom, which is so rare, because third season we were in person, but it was really strange. But because when I went into the third season, we were together, and I saw a whiteboard. I saw, everything that you're supposed to see. And, the first season was great because there were 6 writers, and we were all Native American. And that is so rare because I think the only time was probably Reservation Dogs. And for those of you who don't know, Dark Winds is a story set in the 70s about 2 Navajo cops solving crimes. They're based on these books by Tony Hillerman. And Hillerman probably has like 25 books out there, but he wrote these in the 60s and 70s, or 70s, I should say. And I grew up with these. I grew up with these books just because there wasn't much representation, kind of like in terms of my family. So that was what my dad read. These 2 hero Navajo people. So it was great to kind of take that narrative back in the writers' room and use these characters. Make them lived. Feel lived. Give nuance to them. So that's kind of how I fell into television, and it really kind of is working with the showrunner. Like you said, it's such a. The showrunner just was incredible. He was listening to us, and we'd have stories, we'd be going on tangents, and about what our experiences was on the reservation, and that's the cool thing, when you have a showrunner who actually listens. Because I hear horror stories from other writers about the rooms, and luckily we had a really good experience being in those rooms. But it's going on to their 5th season, and I may return because nobody's hiring now. So I might return, but I've been writing my next feature.
Yeah. I'm curious if anyone can answer this question. When you have that independent spirit, as you all do in your voices, do you ever get a chance to speak to people who have been underrepresented, you feel, in mainstream culture, have had the opportunity to see something you've worked on, and can hear their feedback? They feel seen, they feel heard. I know for me, that's been one of the most, incredible parts of my entire career. What about you? Any experiences like that?
I have a folder in my phone of screenshots of people that have written to me saying that it was the first time that they felt seen, or that they questioned hurting themselves, or things of that nature. And it's a dark comedy about a gay couple. We're not curing cancer over here, but I do think having it be incidental to the storyline, having queerness just be part of the fabric of the world and not a tragic story, is something that really has resonated with a lot of people, and I'm very grateful to have been able to have those connections with people that watched Eastsiders.
Right. What about women watching your pieces, seeing that there's this piece of them that usually gets so compartmentalized or so watered down is brought to life?
I think that I had a lot of amazing responses, and that's kind of why we do the thing we do. It's in order to be in dialogue with the viewer and to resonate in a way that feels like sort of a transformative symbiosis together. And I think with Slip, women's sexuality was so at the forefront of it, and I was also so naked, and sort of
Literally.
that I think it was my intention was to make something that felt like it could turn people on and not feel like it was through a male gaze. And so I think I got a lot of responses from women around that it succeeded for them, and that meant the world to me.
I know from watching your film, Billy, it was so specific to Native American culture that it became universal. Is that something that you keep finding in your work?
Yeah, what I love to write is stories that are, contemporary and, connect with an audience, a broad audience. I that's not, what I think about when I write, but, once it's, finished and I show it, people find a connection, because in Frybread Face, it's about this young kid who lives in the city, this Navajo kid who goes to the reservations for a summer, and, he comes back completely changed. And I think, all of us have been somewhere in our lives, where we've been somewhere we didn't want to go, but something happened during that time, good or bad. So I, really like to touch on, the experience and not dwell on the tragedy of the trauma, I should say, of Native Americans. I love, we laugh a lot. I grew up with, laughing and mothers and, aunties that were strong women. And these are like kind of the experiences that I had. And, like with Benny and Frybread Face, the 10-year-old lead, he in his embrace, he feels his feminine side. He's two spirits, so he follows his feminine side. But it's finding that balance that I think was really beautiful in shooting. And that was something that came natural in the writing process with his story. But not saying, a 10-year-old, he's not defining he's gay. He's still, figuring himself out.
Katie, any surprises to something maybe you pitched in the room where all of a sudden people got it or they felt seen?
One that stands out to me is just when we were developing the world of Paradise, we knew that we were going to have this Black family in the post-apocalypse, and how are they going to get their hair done? And what's going to happen with that? And so when we're building the town, and our art department is like, oh, here are the stores that we're thinking of putting in. We think like a toy store and maybe a salon. We were like, it needs to be a barbershop. It needs to be a Black beauty shop. It needs to be somewhere. We've got this girl with her beautiful braids. Where's she getting her braids done? Who's standing outside of that? Like when we got into her bedroom, it was, what does she have there? Like what's by her bedside? What is this family living and breathing with in their home for really basic things like hair care? And so I just vividly remember that came up. Somebody made a TikTok about that exact question. Where are they getting their hair done? And my collaborator, coworker, Nadra, did a stitch response and was like, here are all the pictures, like here's all the stuff that was on the nightstand, here's her bonnet, here's the barber shop that got cut. A lot of this stuff ended up getting cut out of shots or out of this, but it was so important to us to bring that attention to detail to this really big project that was going to show people in these situations that sometimes we don't get to see. And so that was so important to us going forward. Every little detail like that in the show is something that we really push for.
Okay, we gotta hit it. Billy, you mentioned it. This is a really dark time. In terms of, job opportunities. We've seen, and it goes through ebbs and flows. We know this. A few years ago, there were many, many, many jobs, and now there are very few. And also a lot less is being sold into development. There seems to be little bits of daylight coming through. What are you doing during this time to maintain your voice, to keep your spirit up, and to think, okay, how am I going to move forward in this particular low tide when it comes to money flow, jobs, and opportunities in Hollywood?
Well, I was still continuing to develop, working with other showrunners on developing projects, because they are still, looking and reading stuff and taking pitches. So I don't, it's just the work continues, I'm currently developing a series on my first documentary, Miss Navajo, about this Navajo beauty pageant where they slaughter sheep and don't wear, bathing suits. So it's a real rare beauty contest that's been going on for about 60 years now. I know because my mother was Miss Navajo, and she can slaughter sheep good. And so we're developing that into a contemporary story with 4 young women, because there's probably over 1,000 beauty pageants on indigenous land here in the States. And then really wanting to show these young women. It's kind of like Aaron Brockovich meets Orange Is the New Black. And I have Kaylee Reese from True Detective attached to kind of wrangle the girls. And in that, it's like we have something there, right? So we continue to write, refine, she reads things, and we go back and forth, and that's exciting. And, just, being at, panel, like these sessions and going into these meetings with people at the Industry Connects. It's, you tell them, oh, keep me posted on this, or, and it's just those connections and the networking that you do. I found my manager at the forum probably about 4 years ago, and one of my investors too, Frybread at the forum. So I just keep going, and yes, it's weird out there, but I have to keep going. I have to keep writing.
Any surprises you've discovered about your voice, your independent voice, along the way, your creative process? And if not, that's okay, but I would think there has to be something.
I mean, I would just say, like, I'm constantly toggling, and maybe you'll relate to this, with my independent voice and commerce, and I think might not be surprising, but like, I started with micro-budget indie filmmaking, and the first one that I made was a big hit. We made it for $15,000 a long time ago, and then we got to work in the studio system, and suddenly, I think commerce entered the dialogue in a way that I was like, oh shit, that's actually going to impact the way that my creative process now flows, just because I now know too much. You know what I mean? It's like when you when you start and you're just like, this is my voice, this is what I want to say, at least for my personality type, then you're like, oh no, this is what the marketplace wants, or this is what I'm hearing is selling and isn't selling. Or you take a meeting generally and they say, we're looking for X, Y, and Z. And so then it's like how to maintain the independence and singularity of your voice while also being like smart and not watering it down. Like, my parents are both visual artists, and they couldn't quite hack the commerce part. And so I think I also have that, like, I never wanted to be an artist because I saw that they couldn't actually make a living from it, and that's its own incredibly painful life. And so I was like, so how do I make a living and be an artist and not feel like I'm selling my soul, but I want to be smart about it? And so I guess the thing that I'm always looking at is like, the way to keep your individual artistic process as true and authentic to you, without like kowtowing to the voices that are constantly going like, no, they want this, or no, they don't want this. Because I think in response to your last, or a couple questions ago around people responding to your work, I think the more singular your voice, actually, the more universal your reach. And I think that's the biggest thing that I've learned, is that the second you try to water something down or reach more people, the less people actually will be reached, because our individual stories are strangely the most universal. And the more that you can tap into the authenticity of your voice, the more people are going to go like, actually, that's me too.
I kind of like to speak to both of these things as well. Obviously we're in a point where there's been a turn, like a downturn in the industry, but I think everybody on this stage in one way or another is also grappling with the fact that our authentic voices in the industry, the commercial viability of our identities and voices is up for debate. Literally, right now. And there was a huge boom, particularly from my perspective as a queer artist. I had a movie at HBO Max, a movie at Netflix, was working on a sequel to Easy A, and I had a television show at Universal. And then the faucet got turned the fuck off on everything. And that was all of my friends' experiences as well. And I think we're all kind of coming out of the shadows a little bit now to say, well, actually, we're not just gonna put our lives and our voices and our careers on hold for the next 4 years. There was a defiance in the first 4 years of the previous Trump administration that I would like to see us all get back to. I don't really care personally if my voice is commercial right now. It's my voice, and I'm gonna start screaming.
One of the things, I'm sorry, just too, when we're writing, this pitch, I've gotten notes from some streamers and producers. We're like, at the end, can we just leave out the underrepresented, your audience, your underrepresented communities, and they just kind of want to rip out that because they're like, it's the woke thing that is like, really, like this is like what we have to do now in this political climate that we're in is I got to take out it's this is not underrepresented, haven't seen this story, they just want to rip it out. So that's just something that I'm taking out. But it's like it wasn't like that 10 years ago. It's like, why do you want to see this?
Well, I mean, I've had obviously my own personal experiences with this, right? I mean, after George Floyd, I heard people actually saying things like black is on trend. That made me angry at that point.
Yeah.
And now there's an erasure that's happening to black women in particular in the landscape. And here I am writing a pilot right now for Netflix that's all about black women. I can only believe, and I think you and I maybe are saying sort of the same thing, that audience is out there and they're hungrier than ever to see themselves represented, to hear their stories. I know that fuels my flame, that no matter what the whims of Hollywood might be going through, I'm always about how do I reach my audience. Does that fuel you as well?
Absolutely. I think it's the reason to get out of bed in the morning. You were telling stories to an audience, and we want to engage with that audience because we are that audience, and we all grew up not seeing ourselves fully represented in the way that we should be as complete, complex individuals with flaws and unique character points of view. So I think we all have to kind of keep fighting towards industry that we envision collectively. And we shouldn't just be saying, okay, well, where do I fit into this broken machine?
I love that, because the system is broken. But was the system ever built for our voices, is the question. So as we look beyond Hollywood, which is in its own way kind of finding a smaller space on the landscape of world entertainment, what is the new frontier? It's funny, you mentioned it, like you started, it was $2,000 in a stick of gum for a web series, right? And we know that the web, for now, is still a pretty wide open space. And we've got some more places that we can put our stories. Are any of you experimenting with new media? Are you thinking beyond Hollywood?
I was attached to direct an independent TV series, which I know is sort of that's one of the things we're talking about today. And I'm really interested in that frontier. It didn't work out, which is also the thing about new frontiers. Like, it is we're not yet there, I don't think. I think we're really working on getting there, and I have faith that we can. And the thing that has always helped me in the film space is everything I've ever made as a filmmaker has been turned down by the mainstream space, and I make it in defiance of the gatekeepers, and that's what gets me out of bed in the morning, is to say, like, fuck you, no. And I have always wished that for TV, because it's not, I didn't know that was even an option until very recently, that you could defy the gatekeepers, which become more and more, as you said, sort of imposing in the industry right now. And so I think that it's really exciting there, and there are certain producers who are, coming up with film funds to help independent voices make television shows and then sell them, kind of a la what you're doing. And so I think that's a frontier. It's not new media, but it is a new means to an end, I think, that I haven't explored before, that I'm excited about.
Yeah. I'm curious, Billy, because I feel like you've probably worked on a lot of different scales, right? I mean, directing your independent film, but then also directing these series television. What did you find to be different about those processes for you?
When I was doing my under $1 million feature, we had 30 people on set, And when I went to the television show for Dark Winds, there was 300 people on set, and I was like, what the hell? I was like trying to move my own monitor, like, don't do that. I'm like, what? What do you want for lunch? I don't know. It was crazy, but it was really like, it was interesting to see how television, and film work, because you just, with television, you just got to keep going, you got to keep going, and with features, a narrative, I was just kind of like more, had a pace, but really what came in handy when I was directing my feature was I had 15 years of experience in documentaries before I made my feature. So I went on this feature, and all of my actors were first-time actors, and so I approached it like documentary. I had them do things, and it gave them a little bit more, and the camera person loved it, our DP, and it was just a really kind of just going with the flow and seeing them, just because we had that space and that time. Although working with kids, you only have like 7 hours, so it was like we did have to have some pushing to do. But television, I had to go into episode 4, for instance, and I don't necessarily, you don't get to see the first 3, you know what I mean? So I'm just like, what happened in those 3? How did they direct those? Because they're still cutting those things. And and there's also changes that are happening to the script as you're shooting. So, so as a going in, and sometimes you just didn't, you didn't know, and the actors would just be ready, and you were like, what was the, so I really like talking to Zahn McClernand, who is the lead in Reservation, or in Dark Winds, and just having a chat with him. He's such a good actor and support on the show. So having him and having his support with along with the showrunner, I mean, Dark Winds was my first directing gig for television too, and that's just that connection that I had with the showrunner, and he believed in me, and that is, I mean, I got my first gig. It's so hard to get a directing gig on TV.
I'm so curious too, for you, I mean, as you think about your future and where you want to go, what are some of the dreams you have and ways that you can highlight your voice within or without the system?
It's such a great question. And I think for me, especially early on, I thought I have really intense imposter syndrome very easily. And I thought, okay, I'm going to need to kind of really work my way up and feel like I've earned this, and not that there was going to be another option for me, but I was like, let me be the writer's PA, and let me be there on set, and let me figure out all this stuff so that I really have a base of knowledge for what I'm doing. And part of that is relationships with people within the system and building that trust and having mentors that can put a, approved stamp on my forehead and go, yeah, give her a shot. So that's kind of been one of, honestly, my biggest career focus is learning everything that I possibly can, but also building these relationships both on set and with the executive stuffed shirt type people, so that, because I've seen first-time showrunners out there on bigger projects, and it's easy to get steamrolled, and it's easy also to not show up for your crew and not be a good leader with people. And so to be able to build those skills and relationships, I think and I hope can afford me a space where I am given the shot that I want to make the messed up adaptation of Carmilla that I want to do, so it's about, for me, what's really interesting, especially working with the creators that I have, obviously Dan Fogelman has a deeply, he would say, populist voice. We're making TV for 1 million people, 1 bajillion people, as many eyeballs as we can draw into that. And something he said, for me coming off a show like Station 11, again, a huge HBO Max show, was like, my aunt would never watch that show. And I was like, oh yeah, like my mom would never have watched Station 11 if I hadn't worked on it. But if he was like, I want to make a show that can attack or bring a tiny piece of that feeling of this sort of loss and grief and desperate need for connection within the world to my aunt who will actually watch this. And so for me, it's been been about learning to look at an idea and go, okay, well, how many people do I want to try and reach with this idea? And sometimes it's like 10 people, and those are the people that I want to talk to the most. And other times, when I'm working on another show, when I'm working on Paradise, it's like I'm hoping that those 10 people will see something in the middle of all this other stuff that's going on that will touch them and move them. So, yeah.
I'm curious, so I want to see a show of hands. Anybody in here have an idea that they feel is so unique to their voice that it's probably going to have to be done independently? Anybody here? Oh, okay, many people here. Advice for them. Advice. Anything that you wish someone had told you when you were embarking on such a journey.
Ownership is important. And when you bring financiers, investors, things of that nature into the mix, you're bringing other voices into the mix. And while it's important to collaborate and work well with others, at the end of the day, I've had the experience of having the final say, and I've had the experience of not getting to decide if my project gets to go out into the world. And that is a very painful position to be in, and I find that very relatable. I think most people do. Having your projects that you go through the traditional development system be then owned by the networks. You can't do a good job and do your work and create your art without pouring yourself into it, heart and soul, and then having that kind of cut off at the end of it is very painful. So when approaching an independent project, I know moving forward for me, it's going to be very, very important, especially for lower budget projects, that I really, really get to maintain ownership and agency in those projects. And you can do that a lot of different ways. You can do that through crowdfunding. You can, do that through making it a micro-budget project or a micro-budget proof of concept. It's very hard. People with money want to, they want to attach strings.
This is much less poetic or inspiring, but I would say, learn a lot about producing and write something that can be made. I say that to all of the people that I know, and I say it to myself too. And I was just talking to my partner, it would be so cool if there was a script doctor that would just take $5 million out of your script, just in the writing, because oftentimes, even if your intention is to write something that can be made for a small budget, your imagination goes wild, and you don't even realize that that scene will require 50 extras, and just that is not okay. And in TV, when you're building worlds, I think that is even more challenging because you have to build a world over the course of a season or many seasons. So I think just being pragmatic about the way you write, because if you start that from the inception of the process, it's going to make your life a lot easier in terms of actually getting it off the page.
I think the Duplass brothers are a masterclass in that, and I find them very inspiring. And we should talk about the fact that they right now are making independent television that is getting sold, and I believe they're also maintaining control over it, which is really cool.
They have a new fund for trans filmmakers, right? Yeah, they're great.
I'm also curious about, again, I'm going to go outside of Hollywood. There's a lot of things happening, as we know, right? We have platforms like TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, all these different platforms where there are people, YouTube, creating. And we are supposedly in the creator economy, the creator, first sort of landscape. Are you playing in any of those spaces? Are you doing things that are just, completely yours to be creating?
Oh, I'm blissfully offline. Sorry.
I am not, but I am watching a little bit more. I haven't been into it, but my 10-year-old here watches everything, vertical. And I'm just starting to get into it. I'm like, this is interesting, because before I was pushing it away. So I think, with that social media, of course that's not going to go away. And we're going to have to tap into that somehow. Not sure. I don't know how, but I know that, so I'm keeping up with it,
I do know that most future projects from Marvel movies down the line are going to be shot center punch so it can be cut into portrait. Yes. So that is a reality we all have to contend with. that increasingly people are going to watch it on their phones, and increasingly their attention span is going to be 15 seconds.
It is interesting, though, a lot of like meetings that I feel like I'm on now, there is this like desire to get things back into movie theaters. That's in the film space more than the TV space, obviously. But I don't know. I'm like, it's really daunting when I hear things like that. And then I want to also maintain some hope that it's not just the auteur filmmakers that are going to be able to be played, and that we will still have sort of independent cinema eventized in some way, thanks to places like this. Yeah.
Any advice for multi-hyphenates like yourselves? You know, people who want to not only write, maybe direct, but also star in their shows?
Have a DP that you really, really love and trust, who has your back. That's something that's been very critical for me in my work. Have the monitor accessible, you know, and it, you know, in terms of like juggling different hats, you know, as the crew grows, the challenge grows. So I have a lot of nostalgia for shooting micro-budget projects with a 5-person crew, because we were all like banded and knitted together, and there was an intimacy to the set. And then as it scales, it becomes a lot harder to be in touch as the showrunner, writer, director, actor with what's going on at base camp.
Yeah, I think those are important. I think also a producer, in addition to a DP, who can just be, for me, like prep is just everything. It's when you're doing all the things, when you're wearing all the hats, especially if you're in front of the camera as well, so that everyone is absolutely on the same page on the day, and that there's plan Bs and plan Cs and plan Ds in place, because everything's going to go wrong all the time. And trust is so important. I also think like when you do that much prep and when you're really clear about expectations and the vision, there's also a really important step that is about a release of control, because when you are doing all the things, you're also clearly struggling with issues around control. And I think like the beauty of what we do is also allowing for everyone else to step up to their highest game, because they feel that they have agency and ownership and artistry that is not just about serving your vision, but it is about serving a collective vision where everyone's voices are sort of lifted up. And I think that when you're new, when I was new at doing all the things, there's like an instinct to hold on really tight to the vision, because it's your baby, and every step of the way you've sort of envisioned each second of every element, and then the beauty is, I think, allowing for that to just sort of dissipate while still knowing that now we're in a beautiful community where all these people are going to bring their own artistry and visions.
I think we're going to be wrapping up soon, but I've got one more for you. And we touched on it a little bit, but I would imagine there's a lot of people here today thinking about, okay, I've got this independent idea, I've been really working on it, but where do I get the money? How do I finance this thing? Remind us again, you mentioned crowdfunding, but ways that you can start to finance your projects.
I'll go first. Eastsiders self-financed $2,000 for the first 2 episodes, and then we came to crowdfunding, set a goal of $15,000, which seemed like a profound amount of money back in 2012. Now it's, you know, obviously very hard to get groceries with that. And then blew past that goal in the first day and raised almost twice that. And that emboldened us in the second season to set a higher goal, and we raised $150,000 to shoot the second season, because we had a relationship with and had grown an audience. You know, so you connect with those people and give them also kind of empower them with your work. I think that crowdfunding kind of maybe got a little oversaturated for a minute, but I think now you see it coming out in Patreon. The OnlyFans for your brain, which patreon.com/Kit Williamson. But, so that's one road. Then independent financing, which is a road that I'm not as familiar with, but I'm trying to school myself in. And then there's going through the traditional pipelines, the studios, the networks, and things of that nature. And, like we've spoken to, there's advantages. There's more money in that for sure, but then there are strengths.
Right, and less ownership, right? The more money you're taking from the outside, the less you can hold on to.
Yeah, and I think fiscal sponsorship, everybody here is probably aware of Film Independence fiscal sponsorship programs, but that's a great way to incentivize somebody giving you particularly that mid-level donation where it's significant on their taxes and significant to your budget.
Billy, any advice about fundraising?
No, I want to listen and find out myself.
Me too.
So thank you.
And if anybody has money, talk to me afterwards.
There are like more and more, or at least a handful, not just the Duplass brothers, although they're great, but people like the Duplass brothers that Joe Lewis is doing at Amplify Pictures. There's a couple of people who are really hungry for new voices in terms of independent television, and I think having like a great, and as I said, producible spec, if not all episodes written of a like 7-episode series, that's going to like get you really far, because if it's producible, well written, and it's all there on the page, they don't have to pay a room. Sadly, I'm not advocating for that, but in this Wild West, like, you got to be scrappy and you got to be like on the grind every day. So if you have, even I was talking to Joe recently about a project, and it was just an idea, and he was like, yeah, if you give me the the pages and the scripts, then that's the conversation. And so I think, yeah, just being really practical about having something to go like, here, do you want to finance this? This is what it looks like. This is the vision. Have a deck. Have all your boxes checked, and then the packaging can begin, because that's the next level in getting financing, is getting financeable cast attached.
What I do too is I follow different like media grants and residencies. Film Fatales, if you follow that on Instagram, they always put these deadlines for different residencies, grants, or writing. And I find these, I look more into them, and it's just like, and it makes me do more research, and I find that there's smaller grants, and those small grants can build up, 10,000. I remember I was making a short documentary, and I got, little small grants, but it was like 10,000 added up. And, but I look at those, social media, I look at those, the deadlines and what they offer. I went to McDowell Fellowship for 4 weeks to write, and you got a little grant, that helped too. So I just look for those things to get kind of, and all somebody asked, I was like, hey, there's this Women in Film grant that you should look at, So I kind of have to do my own homework, and it's out there. It's out there.
I'm gonna represent for the new media people who might be here today to let you know that yes, there are opportunities out there. I've discovered them, and I'll share with you that there are brands now who want to go directly to creators to have you create a series for them that goes directly online that they are willing to pay you for. And they don't want you to say the name of their product in that series. That's not the goal. The goal is to create a world that represents something of the spirit of their series. I put that out there because I want to encourage people, especially people that are creators. There's many series that are being discovered on YouTube, on TikTok. And these are things that you can do, that you can self-finance, that you can make with the phone in your pocket for other people who are carrying stories in their pockets. So as somebody who comes way out of traditional TV, I'm happy to tell you that I think there's a really exciting new frontier out there. If you have anything to add to that, I'm more than happy to engage.
We've worked with brand partners on second, third, and fourth season of Eastsiders, and increasingly you do see people that are just sort of willing to cut a check, and that's empowering. I think sometimes having a robust social media presence is important for that, which is, it doesn't always leaves you feeling a little sticky, but you still can get things made that way.
Well, television is all brand sponsorship. Let's be honest about it. I mean, from the beginning of television. And so to say that you're making television and it doesn't have anything commercial going on with it is, okay, that's extremely independent and very rare, right? But I'm so curious, so in that, you talked about ownership, which I love, but you also talked about that you had brand sponsorship. Were there moments where you felt compromised?
Thankfully, no. And in that sense, it was a train that was leaving the station, and I was inviting people to get on it with distribution in place. And that's a great position to be in when you're going to a brand and saying, I can, get your fiber pills for gay men in the hands of a drag queen on Netflix. I will drive your Audi Q5 across the country and be gay in it.
Just another way to think about where financing can come from, because we are seeing advertisers who are going away from spending ad dollars to pay for commercials to going directly to digital and looking for ways to spread their ad dollars all around there. And they all need creators who have voices that are not trying to write commercials. So putting that out there. I think are we a wrap? Okay, I'm getting the nod from gorgeous Maria. So thank you so much for coming. Thank you so much for sharing your stories. Appreciate it. And I really wish everyone the best with all of your independent voices and your independent projects.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks, y'all.